Phase one, as I mentioned in phase one, is about evaluating the safety profile of the drug. And then we ask permission to go to phase two. In phase two, what we are trying to prove, safety in larger patient population and efficacy. We also want to make sure whether your drug works or not, right? So just like safety, how are you going to prove that your drug is efficacious? What happens if your drug really works? Yes, they expect positive results, right? So we use a term called ORR, overall response rate, or observable response rate. So we are parallelly, evaluating safety in a much more broader population, but we also want to make sure whether your drug works or not to see the clinical efficacy of your drug. So here we'll have more data compared to the phase one, and we submit the safety and efficacy data to the FDA, asking permission to go to a much more comprehensive phase called as phase three. Once the drug is close, approaching phase three, there are more highly likely chances for the drug to be approved because you're getting some credible and concrete data to support your hypothesis. Now, what happens in phase three? Well, your drug is safe and effective, but is it the first in class? Is the best in the market? Because FDA might come back and say like, well, there are much more standard drugs or popular drugs in the market. Why I have to give permission to your substandard drug? So for that, you need to prove that your drug is either the best in the market or at least equivalent to the industry standard. So for that, you need to do much more comprehensive studies where you are conducting trials to evaluate safety and efficacy in a much more larger population, and also you're comparing your drug with either the industry standard drug or a placebo. It might take a couple of years to do it, and then we use specialized trial designs called randomizations and blinding to make sure that data we collected is purely by chance with no outliers or any other selection bias. And here we will have an extensive amount of data in phase three. At this point, we, as a sponsor, will submit another application to the FDA, and that application is called as NDA application. Abbreviation NDA stands for New Drug Application. The difference between the first application, which is IND, and NDA is that first word is gone. What is the first word? Investigational. It's not investigational anymore. Why? Because you already proved the safety, efficacy, and comparative viability of the product. And now you're asking permission from the FDA to actually market the product to the much more generalized population. The turnaround time for NDA application is anywhere between 2 to 2.5 years. That's the standard timelines, but timelines can change depending on the situation. For example, take our COVID-19 crisis, right? People or a lot of pharmaceutical companies already started their phase one or trials to develop vaccine. So we can't wait 2 to 2.5 years for that to be approved, right? If you see any early signs of safety and clinical efficacy, they can give emergency authorization to use it on emergency grounds. So timelines are always expedited because we always make sure the safety of the patients is protected. So within the 2 to 2.5 years, the FDA will review the data. They also comes for inspection, and then they can approve the drug, or they can reject the drug, or they can approve the drug with contingencies or conditions. One of the conditions is if it is a high-risk trial, they will say, well, we are approving your drug, but we want you to conduct phase 4 trials for the next 5 years. And what are these phase 4 trials? Well, phase 4 trials are called as post-marketing surveillance studies. Surveillance means long-term watch. Marketing, post means when the drug is already in the market. So why we are conducting post-marketing studies? Well, the drug might be safe now. What happens when the drug is prescribed long-term? What are the long-term complications of the drug? Or what happens when the drug is prescribed to the general population? Like most of the times we control our patient population in clinical trials. Normally we exclude pregnant, children, immunocompromised, senior citizens, and people with renal insufficiencies, low glomerular filtration rate. So we control patient population. That doesn't mean that these people never ever get the drug. The only way they can get the drug is when the drug has been approved and been prescribed to the general population. So that's where we collect humongous amount of data through phase 4 studies, where we capture long-term safety profile, drug-drug interactions, and how the drug is behaving in general population, people with different genetic components, HLA components. So that's the reason phase 4 studies are also called as post-marketing surveillance studies, or long-term safety studies, or pharmacovigilance studies. Even if FDA doesn't impose any conditions, a lot of sponsor companies still do phase 4 studies for their own competitive edge. Because how many times we hear in the news that this particular drug or device has been recalled from the pharmacy shelf 10 years in the market. How that's possible? Because of the phase 4 trials, where they are seeing a lot of long-term safety issues. That's the reason they have to recall those particular drugs or devices from the pharmacy shelf. So that is pretty much about the phases of the clinical trials. But what happens within that each and every phase? Now, once the pharmaceutical companies or sponsor gets approval to continue the clinical trials, what's next? We need patients, right? How are we going to get the patients? We can't just go and simply, get patients from the street, right? They need to be treated in a specialized facilities, and that will be big hospitals, university medical centers, medical schools, specialized research facilities. So how are we going to get those sites? Through a process called as feasibility. Feasibility means reaching out to these particular hospitals to see if they're interested in participating in our trials. Well, when you're reaching out to these hospitals, whom are you going to reach out to? There might be like thousands of doctors there, right? So even though we are reaching to a hospital, we will be reaching out to a particular individual who will take the responsibility of conducting these clinical trials at the particular hospital. And we call those individuals as PIs. And abbreviation PI stands for Principal Investigator. For example, if you are conducting oncology studies and then you want to reach out to Memorial Sloan Cancer Center or Columbia or some other big university hospital, there may be 10,000 different doctors there, but there may be a panel of doctors who are specifically solid state oncologists or hematologists. And within that, there will be someone who is willing to take the responsibility of overseeing these clinical trials at that particular center. We reach out to those particular individuals to know their interest levels in participating in our trial. That's the process called as feasibility. Well, we develop certain questionnaire and then send those questionnaires in the form of a survey monkey link or some kind of standardized survey and send it to those potential principal investigators. Some of them will respond, but some of them will come back and say, well, we want to see your protocol because I'm not sure if I'm interested right now, but if I see your drug and the mechanism of action or the protocol, how you're going to design this study, I might talk to my colleagues here and see if they're interested, then we will participate. However, the sponsor companies are not ready to share their protocol or any of their intellectual property. So in order for the sponsor to share the intellectual property, we need to be legally covered. For that reason, the pharmaceutical companies will send an important legal document called as CDA. Abbreviation CDA stands for Confidentiality Disclosure Agreement. So it is nothing but like non-disclosure statement. So we send it to the sites will sign it. Once we are legally covered, the sponsor can share those documents with them, and then they will answer all the questions. But do you want to believe them? You want to believe them, but this industry doesn't care whether you believe it or not. This industry works on data. This industry works on regulations. This industry works on documentation. Remember that one word, documentation. Document. If you don't document, never happen. So tomorrow FDA will come back during inspection and say like, why you selected this particular site? You need to show the documentation, like what made you as a sponsor to select this site. So how that's possible? Someone from the sponsor team has to literally go to the site, check for themselves, and then officially recommend them for site selection. And that particular individual role is called as CRA. Abbreviation CRA stands for Clinical Research Associate. He or she can either work for a sponsor or a CRO. And their job is to officially conduct an on-site visit, which is called as on-site qualification visit or on-site site selection visit. Go to the hospital, validate all the responses they gave through those SurveyMonkey list, take a tour of the facility, and make sure that they have proper resources, equipment, personnel, manpower, and most importantly, patience to conduct these clinical trials. So they will conduct the visit, they will generate the report, they will officially recommend the site for selection. That's when we officially select the site, and we send an official site selection letter congratulating them they are officially selected to participate in the protocol, and then we'll send some of the regulatory packets to them. We send hundreds of regulatory documents. I'm mentioning some of the important documents here. The first document is protocol, investigator's brochure, informed consent forms, any other advertisement and recruitment materials. And we have separate chapters for all of these, but why we need to send these regulatory documents to the sites? Just like pharmaceutical companies will get permission from FDA to continue with the clinical trials, each and every clinical research facility involved in clinical trials has to get approval from their own institutional review boards or ethics committees, because we want to make sure that they conduct the clinical trials in compliance with GCP regulations, utmost ethical requirements, and then consenting the patients, which is purely voluntary, and then protect the right, safety, and well-being of the subjects. So for that, they need to have some ethics boards who review the protocols within the hospitals and take decisions on behalf of the patients. So bottom line, any clinical research facilities, university medical centers who are actively engaged in clinical trials has to get approval from their own IRBs, which stands for institutional review boards or independent ethics committees. So in order for them to submit to their IRB, they need some documents to submit, right? That's where these regulatory documents comes handy. Protocol, it's an extensive scientific document, which we call it as operating manual of a clinical trial. It's like a Bible of a clinical trial. If you want to know any details about the clinical trial, what document you refer to? Protocol. It tells you how to select the patients, how to conduct the study, how to capture the data, how to analyze the data, how to report the data. Investigator's brochure, abbreviated as IB, is a technical document which contains both clinical and non-clinical information pertaining to the drug. It's just like a package insert for an approved product, you know? So a package insert for an investigational product, we call it as investigator's brochure. In fact, it is one of the earliest document produced on a clinical trial because it also contains preclinical data. The next document is informed consent form. As you know, before we even screen the patients, the first thing we need to collect is an informed consent after explaining all the details to the patients. And then any subject-facing materials like advertisements and recruitment materials. So once we submit this to IRB, the IRBs will review them. If they have any questions, they will come back. Otherwise, they will provide IRB approval, saying that study may be conducted at that particular hospital. While that IRB review is ongoing, the sponsor company also reaches out to the sites with the budget sheet. Why we need budget? Well, don't you think that sites or hospitals need to get paid for all the work they do for treating the patients and capturing the data and submitting the data? For that, we need to agree on the dollar amount, how much we want to pay for those time and effort. That's where budget comes into picture. We send the budget with a fair market value and open the floor for negotiation. Because every hospital is different. A hospital in Ohio might be different from a hospital in New York in terms of the charges, how much they charge for those particular procedures. That's why budget is open for negotiation. While the budget has been finalized, we also reach out to them with contract. What is contract? Well, everyone should understand their roles and responsibilities, their obligations towards clinical trial conduct. So tomorrow, no one can step on each other's toes, right? So contract also explains how we're going to disperse the money. Budget says how much we're going to pay. Contract, details how we're going to pay that amount. So both legal teams will review the contract. They go back and forth and make any necessary changes. When all the language seems appropriate, both parties will sign the contract. That's when we call it as fully executed contract. IRB approval and a fully executed contract triggers drug shipment. We will not ship the drug to the hospitals until IRB approvals and fully executed contracts are in place. Once the drug is there, we also ship any ancillary supplies like infusion pumps or filters or closed connection tubes or blinding supplies if the trial is blinded trial, and also the regulatory binders to store all the documents. And then laboratory supplies if you are collecting any pharmacokinetic samples or biomarker samples. So we send all of them during the drug shipment. Once everything is in place, the CRA will go for one more on-site visit, and that visit is called as SIV. It stands for Site Initiation Visit. In site initiation visit, we train the sites, we make sure everyone understands the protocol, we make sure that everyone has access to the systems to conduct the trial. At that point, the CRA will send in site activation letter saying that, well, congratulations, now you are fully onboarded, now you can start screening your patients. The hospital or the sites will start screening the patients. Depending on the inclusion and exclusion criteria, they start enrolling the patients. They start treating the patients with the study drug. When they start treating the patients with the study drug, what we expect? We expect data, right? Humongous amount of data. Data from screening, data from physical examination, data from CAT scans, data from EKGs, data from procedures, data from laboratories. So at that point, CRA will go for multiple periodic site monitoring visits. Why I said multiple? Because if the patient comes more than once, CRA has to go more than once. Periodic means if the study design says, well, the patient has to come every 4 weeks, the CRA will go every 4 weeks. And why we are conducting monitoring visits? We want to make sure that the sites or hospitals are conducting clinical trials in compliance with protocol, in compliance with regulations, in compliance with ICH GCP standards, and in compliance with any applicable local regulatory requirements. For that, someone from the sponsor has to literally go to the site periodically and check for themselves. That's the whole intention of site monitoring visits. When all patients comes off the study, a CRA will go for one final last time to officially close down the site. And that visit is called as site termination or site closeout visit. In order for the CRA to close the site, what needs to happen? All patients has to come off the study, all issues has been closed and resolved, all data queries has been resolved, database has been locked, frozen, and payments are all done to the sites. At that point, CRA will go and officially close down the site. Then the sponsor team will collect the data, analyze the data, and report the data to the FDA, asking permission to go to the next phase. Phase 1 starts with feasibility, ends with reporting the data to the FDA, and then phase 2 starts again with feasibility, searching for more sites, and ends with reporting the data to the FDA. So irrespective of the phases, each and every phase is called as a clinical trial or a clinical study, and the whole process repeats. That is from feasibility to reporting the data to the FDA. So folks, this is nothing but clinical trial operations. When you look at the clinical trial operations here, I just mentioned like 16 different cross functionalities here. Who's going to work in the feasibility? People with what experience? PR experience, digital marketing experience. Who works on the CDA? People with legal experience or paralegal experience. CRA, scientific background or management background, who has excellent communication skills, detail oriented, can fit into the CRA profile. Who works on the protocol? Hundreds of people. Pharmacologists, clinicians, pharmacists, discovery scientists, toxicologists, biostatisticians, data management folks, regulatory team, medical writers, pharmacokinetic teams, translational research folks. These are all the persons who contribute to the content within the protocol. Same thing applies for investigators' brochures, chemists, organic, or and then pharmacologists, PK scientists, translational research folks. all will work collaboratively for investigators brochure. Advertisements and recruitment materials. Who works on it? Regulatory team, digital marketing team, PR experienced, right? Now, who works on the budgets? What experience? People with experience in finance, right? And who works on the contracts? People with, again, legal, paralegal experience. Who works in the drug shipment? People with manufacturing experience, people with supply chain experience, people with chemistry, CMCs, quality. They all work in product quality, works in the supply chain. And then when it comes to capturing the data, who works in capturing the data? People with what experience? IT, information technology. Within that IT, there's a whole different department who's going to design the case report forms to capture the data. Database programmers, statistical programmers, SAS programmers, data delivery leads, data analysts. And then who's going to analyze the data? Biostatisticians will analyze the data. And who's going to submit the data to the FDA? Medical writers with cooperation from submissions team. So if you see, almost I mentioned like 16 different cross functionalities who work closely to make clinical trials happen. So now you tell me, do you need to have a scientific or science background to get a job in clinical trials? No, right? So clinical trials, just like any other industry, it's another domain where people with different experience levels will come and collaborate and contribute to the clinical trial operations. So here at Solars, we don't train you on a position. We don't train you on a clinical research coordinator or a CRA or an operations lead or a trial manager. We train you on the whole process using the systems. Now, if you don't have a scientific experience, you will target the entry level. If you have a couple of years of experience in either preclinical or clinical, you target management positions. You already have a management positions experience, you target the leadership positions. But you use the same clinical trial operations experience with the same enterprise level softwares they use. So I'm going to quickly show you some of the systems we use for clinical internship and then open the floor for any questions you guys might have. All right, just give me 1 second before I log into these systems. Are you guys able to see my screen? So the first system here, which you are seeing on my screen, it's called as Clinical Conductor. And if you see, this is an enterprise level software. It's a very popular software or system which a lot of companies use. And this is our CTMS system. CTMS stands for Clinical Trial Management System. So our internship is of 20 weeks. The first 4 or 5 weeks, I'll take all the important chapters we need to go into the internship. From week 6 onwards, for the next 20 weeks, I'll be pretty much managing all the internship. My colleague, Professor Mark, will take the rest of the chapters. And if you see Clinical Conductor Enterprise is a CTMS system where we train you to manage the sites, manage the countries, manage the studies, manage the portfolio. So depending on your experience levels, you use the same system for different managements. Corporate management, governance management, portfolio management, study management, country management, site management, and subject management. Everything will be done through Clinical Conductor. We programmed 4 different studies with 4 different therapeutic areas, and then you'll be working with the sites, and then you will be using this to literally conduct site qualification visits, site initiation visits, site monitoring visits, and site closeout visits. So for the first 12 weeks, you will be working on the CTMS system with different virtual case study scenarios, where you'll be working with 4 different studies and sites, and then pretty much conducting those visits. Then you will be trained on the next system, which is called as Master Control, which is our trial master file. Trial master file is the master file maintained at the site level, sponsor level. It is for inspection readiness activities, electronic repository. So here, if you see a lot of job descriptions, you might have already Googled job descriptions, like they always ask for trial master file experience or ETMF experience. So master control is our trial master file, where you will be given an opportunity to work with the documents, uploading the documents using proper naming conventions and version controls, electronic workflows, and then also inspection readiness activities and site management, trial master file, reconciliation activities. So week 13, 14, 15 will be training you on my master control, which is your trial master file. Then we'll be training you on the grant projects, where you will be conducting different types of the visits using all the case scenarios, using all these 3 systems. And then you will have a grant project, and then you will have an exit interview. And that's when you're gonna hit the job market. But again, depending on your comfort levels, you might also start applying for the jobs midway through the internship too. We have our career services team. We will be reaching out to you for boot camps, resume preparations, LinkedIn profiling, and then also match you with any potential recruiters and pass on the job opportunities to your emails. But again, no one is promising you a job. So I'm telling you on day one, in fact, no one in the world can promise you a job. They can give you all the resources they need to take the first interview call to the next level. But no one promises you a job, so do we. We at Solars, we are an education institution. We have master's program. We are in the business for past 12 years. We need to have certain placements rates to be in the business. Can't disclose the numbers now, but you can always talk to the admissions team to get those. But as I mentioned, every individual is different. Every individual skill sets are different. But again, we train you on the processes using these systems. We train you on all kinds of real experiences, and it's up to you to take that first interview call to the next level. It all depends on how you work, how hard you work, how smart you work. So a lot of things depend on it, but we'll give you all the knowledge you need, all the hands-on experience you need, so you can bridge that gap. If you don't have an experience, you're bridging that gap through internship, which is a hands-on experience. If you already have an experience, you are bridging that gap for management positions. If you already have a management experience, you're bridging that gap for leadership positions. So that is pretty much about our program. And as I mentioned, each and every class is recorded. Mondays and Tuesdays will be theory sessions. Rest will be the internship. As I mentioned, the recordings will be available 24 hours after the lecture, so you can go back to listen to it to reinforce your memory. And each and every class we have a case study. It's like, I believe in personality. I believe in discussions. It shouldn't be one way, it should be both ways. So instead of asking individual questions, I always accumulate that into a case study, and ask the team members to brainstorm and present their ideas for 2 to 3 minutes. I want them to talk, to open up. so that in the future, if you get some kind of situational, technical, or behavioral questions, you'll be in much more comfortable situation to answer them because you kind of dealt with them in one way or other in the past. So that is pretty much about it, guys. And at this point, I'm going to open floor for any questions you might have. Let me first see the questions from the chat. And then before I say, like, anything about, I'm a subject matter expert, ask me anything about the careers or industry, but don't ask me questions about the cost or anything. Any questions related to the cost of the program, please refer it to the admissions team. They will work with you one-on-one to see what options we have for you to be fully onboarded. Any questions about the logistics, you please talk to or send an email to our student services folks. They will explain you the schedules and when's the next class and what's the process to enroll in. But if we have any questions about the industry, you can talk to me. The first question is, I'm expecting something for clinical research with data from EMR. Yes, Kripa, it's in the EDC, you will have an opportunity to work with the case report forms where you will be entering the data as a coordinator, but you parallelly switch gears to work as a CRA for source data verifications. So using the same system, we'll be training you as a coordinator and also the CRA, and also as an operations lead or a trial manager for reviewing the data and also verifying the data through electronic medical records. We don't have access to electronic medical records. Those are hospital specific, but we have manual case report forms or source documents, and then we use those into the EDC system where you have electronic case report forms. I'm a research and development chemist in consumer goods and fragrances. I have 20 years of experience. What is your recommendation for me to most quickly get into clinical research? So I have some personal experiences where some of my colleagues actually worked in the consumer goods and fragrances. They actually work for L'Oreal. So if you see, some of the big pharmaceutical companies also have the consumer line too. So you already have that experience, and with 20 years of experience with that research field, I will say, like, you can go into mid-management positions with this clinical trial operations experience. Because you kind of understand the R&D, even though it is not directly related to the subject treatment, but you still understand, in order for the consumer goods to be approved, they follow the same R&D. So you kind of have that experience, but now you're extrapolating that with the clinical trial operations experience to go into management. And probably within the 20 years, you might also have people's management experience, so you can go as a functional manager as well. I did work as a clinical research coordinator in India for 4 years. Your recommendation for me to get easily job over here? There is no easy fix, Palak, but yes, your clinical research coordinator job will definitely help. It doesn't matter where you work because the clinical trial industry is pretty global now, right? We have parallel submissions in US, parallel submissions in European Union, Asia Pac, Middle East, right? So you already did a research work as a clinical research coordinator. Then from a career standpoint, your next level will be the clinical research associates, and this will be the best fit for you. So to use these systems and then conduct these visits in a virtual environment, then you will see yourself as a CRA 1 or 2, because you already did the coordinator work. You know exactly what happens in the hospitals. You know the subject management. So now you will be seeing the clinical trials from the other end of the table, working for a corporation. So the CRA will be your next career after the clinical research coordinator role. How are students matched for internships? Do internships lead to full-time opportunities upon completion? Internships, normally, currently we have internships for clinical research coordinators. Like a couple of months back, we had a delegation from Memorial Sloan Kettering. They came in and they took like almost 35 resumes. So when things were good before the COVID, we used to have the networking sessions where recruiters used to come in our Edison location in Menlo Park Mall. But most of the times it's through the career services. They match your profile based on your experience. As I mentioned, like not all of them are at the skill set level, right? So we need to also make sure that our relationship with them also should be intact. So we evaluate students periodically, and then we do the exit interviews too. That's how we match them. But most of the times, it's tough to get internship within the pharmaceutical companies because of the HIPAA compliance and sensitive data that you are targeting. But that's the reason we have this virtual internship at the comfort of your house, or you can come in class once things get cleared up. But that's how we match for the coordinator positions and other hospital-based positions directly through delegation, and then sending resumes and then interviewing them individually on a case-by-case basis. Training for 5 weeks. How will job market? Clinical trials. Start pay. Will there be assignment during the course? Training is for training is not for 5 weeks. The first 5 weeks, I'll be training you on the theory sessions. Then from week 6 for the next 20 weeks, you'll be trained on the clinical internship. Internship is also, you'll be given the case studies, you'll be given access to the systems, and then it's a self-paced. Once we explain how to do this, you can do it at your own pace, but we'll be in the background to answer all the questions every week, because those case studies are literally the projects. So every week you have a separate project with different cases, because you're training on different roles too, right? You switch roles periodically. So that's how it works. Starting pay is different from different positions, right? It goes with experience, and but I cannot discuss pay and the recordings, but